The waters off a tiny Caribbean island called Bimini cover a long stone structure that scientists have yet to explain. The stones appear to be so carefully placed, some people have concluded they are either a road or a wall, perhaps even a remnant of Atlantis. A nearby healing well is supposedly linked to the mystical springs of that lost civilization. While diving near Bimini, a San Diego physician claims discovery of a submerged pyramid, inside which he found a crystal ball. He says this crystal emits a power capable of repelling metal. Is it possible that the Bimini Wall, the well, and the crystal ball share a common past with the legendary continent of Atlantis? The Twin Islands of Bimini, 60 miles east of Florida, are a tropical paradise, home for 2,000 people. The atmosphere is relaxed and happy. It seems difficult to imagine that these easygoing people could be the descendants of Atlanteans who purportedly had the power to rule the world. There is, however, evidence that alludes to that fact. Beyond the fashionable yachting docks in the dense undergrowth of the North Island is the figure of a fish etched in sand. Native lore gives no clue to what it represents, but it does lie close to a mysterious series of huge square rocks submerged in 15 feet of water off the coast. The blocks are so perfectly fitted together that some people have likened them to a Roman highway. No clues exist to the origin of the blocks. There are claims that they are ordinary beach rock which broke off from the Bimini coastline thousands of years ago. Such formations are common in tropical waters throughout the world. One of those who believes the wall is beach rock is Eugene Shin, a U.S. Geological Survey team member who conducted an analysis of the Bimini Wall.
We did two types of things. First, we cored the blocks, and we determined that they were beach rock. And every geologist, and that's dozens of geologists, have looked at those rocks, and everyone has come to the conclusion it's beach rock because it's so easy to recognize. The question is, are those slabs of beach rock in place?
Shin and a three-man diving team used hydraulic drills to bore through the rocks. 18 cores were taken. The goal was to determine if the stones had once been part of the coastline. If so, have they fallen into the sea or been carefully placed in position? After drilling down half a foot, the geologists removed the cores and examined them closely. The pattern of the grain indicated that the stones had formed naturally and then at some later date became submerged. This finding led to Shin's own conclusions about the origin of the wall.
Oh, I think that it's an entirely natural phenomenon, composed of beach rock, as I pointed out earlier, and a combination of a little rise in sea level and the scouring out of the sand underneath has caused the blocks to settle to the bottom. And all of the various shapes can easily be explained by well-known natural phenomenon familiar to all geologists.
Shin points to a similar phenomenon occurring at the Dry Tortugas National Park south of Key West, Florida. Could the constant attack of the surf have created the lines in the Bimini Wall, just as it has created these individual blocks in the Tortugas? Other questions remain unanswered. How could the Bimini Wall have dropped 15 feet when the natural erosion rates indicate that it should be no deeper than 3 feet below the surface? More importantly, how could part of the wall run perpendicular to Bimini's coastline? We are left to ponder the possibility that the Bimini stones were so carefully cut and aligned They are in harmony with existing natural beach rock. This painstaking placement would require sophisticated mechanical tools. Such tools could only be designed and handled by people of superior intelligence. In the 1930s, psychic Edgar Cayce predicted that part of Atlantis would surface in the late 1960s. In 1968, the Bimini Wall was discovered. Was it possible that the strange stone structure could be part of Atlantis or one of its outposts? Plato was the first to mention Atlantis. While chronicling aspects of the Atlantean people, he claimed that they controlled energy-charged crystals as well as healing wells possessing great curative powers. Healing wells do exist, according to Les Hemingway, author, explorer, and brother of Ernest Hemingway. He had heard of just such a well on Bimini. He and his daughter Hilary agreed to guide us to the site. A narrow inlet, approximately 300 yards long, leads into a mangrove swamp. The brackish water is populated by tiny sharks and rays. Some, like Hemingway, speculate that both plant and animal life thrive extremely well in the area as a result of some peculiar qualities possessed by the well water. Admittedly, Hemingway is not an expert on the well's special properties as a result of direct personal experience. However, he has concluded that the well itself apparently possesses the power to heal.
Here is where the actual fountain of youth is. The flow is thousands of gallons per day, and it's absolutely cold, pure, fresh water coming right up in a saltwater pool. The water apparently has definite curative powers because various people who have both major and minor ailments have soaked in it and have experienced an amazing amount of ease from their problems. People who have gout, for instance, have found that the gout disappears in 2 or 3 soakings. Other people with small skin cancers and people who have skin inflammations have found that the inflammations and the small growths on their skins have literally disappeared as a result of poultices and soaking with water from this fountain.
Surprisingly, Hemingway's claims have received some scientific support. Miami psychologist Adolfo Villasuso tested the well waters and found an unusual amount of a certain element.
There were 2 water samples that I had analyzed in 2 local laboratories. One of them I took myself because I was kind of surprised at the high amount of lithium that was found in the well. It was a substantial amount.
Laboratory analyses repeatedly revealed that the well water did have an extremely high content of lithium. Researchers within the last 10 years have found that lithium has been particularly useful in producing soothing reactions in both normal and disturbed people.
Originally, before it was known that lithium exerted a calming, a therapeutic effect in people with manic depressive illnesses, there are stories in Roman times, in the Middle Ages, that people with this illness were sent to wells which were high in lithium, and lo and behold, they were cured.
Did an ancient race know of Bimini's lithium well? If so, perhaps Plato's assertion that Atlantis possessed magical waters was correct.
The way this well has been cut down through solid rock and the way this well seems to be so well hidden are 2 very different things. The hiding part, I think, may have developed in the last few hundred years and is a result of just local growth. But the cutting down through solid rock is something that had to be done by intelligent beings who had access to great use of tools and most unusual tools. We don't know whether Atlanteans did this or not. I, of course, would like to think that they did, and it's very possible that they did. It's just that none of us have been able to trace back prehistory to Atlantean days in this particular spot.
From the air, another peculiar fact about Bimini becomes apparent. Perfectly straight lines carved in the sand slice across the island. Most point directly to the well. Perhaps the lines, the Bimini Wall, and the well are linked by common ties to the people of Atlantis. Is it possible that further exploration around Bimini might reveal hard evidence of the brilliant but lost Atlantean civilization? The secrets of a bygone civilization are often not easily revealed. The discovery of structures built by the early Egyptians sometimes leave us more puzzled than satisfied. Great debates rage over how an ancient people accomplished such architecturally complicated buildings. And no one explanation satisfies the question, why were the pyramids built? Equally intriguing are similar structures found throughout Central America. Could the construction of these pyramids be linked with those in Egypt? The many stone walls that survive today reveal a high level of workmanship. The complicated stonework produced by both cultures still bemuses modern science. The stones off Bimini bear remarkable resemblance to those in Egypt and Central America. Is it possible that Bimini somehow linked the two together? In 1972, Miami disc jockey Roby Young and well-known psychic Irene Hughes launched a unique experiment here recreated for In Search Of. They hired a plane to fly over the waters surrounding Bimini. The purpose of the flight was to gain psychic impressions of the area to help uncover tangible evidence of the existence of an ancient civilization.
Tell you where we're going at all. We'll just sort of fly around, and if you get a feeling, it'll confirm. Now below us, you can see, is just crystal clear water. The drop off of the Gulf Stream, 3,000 feet down. From then on east, what do you think?
Well, I feel that it is all the way along, like a tunnel, you know, but I feel that we have to make this turn. And as we turn, we're going to see, on the right-hand side, we're going to see some blocks. And on the left-hand side, we're going to begin to see gold color in different spots in the water. And I feel it's right over this way, and we're going to have to go that way and curve right back around that way.
The plane crisscrossed the skies for more than 2 hours. Finally, Irene directed the search to an area where she felt something was buried on the ocean floor.
It's a building, and I feel that it is pure marble, the most beautiful marble in the world, similar to that, some of that was used in the building of the pyramids in Egypt. I feel that it is inhabited by the voices and the images of ancient peoples.
The spot selected by Irene became the subject of an extensive search. For 2 years, divers combed the sea looking for evidence of an ancient civilization. They found the usual array of tropical fish and brilliantly colored coral, but nothing else. Finally, at the foot of a steep cliff, a diver spotted a deeply encrusted object on the ocean floor. What he had found was the base of a marble column. After a series of unsuccessful attempts, divers finally brought to the surface a number of marble slabs, each weighing nearly a ton. The slabs had apparently been part of a much larger structure. Whether they were in the process of being transported and went down in a shipwreck, or had been constructed in an area that was later submerged, is unknown. The Bimini-Atlantis connection might have languished had it not been for Raymond Brown, San Diego physician and adventurer. He believes he has found conclusive links between a Caribbean civilization and those of Egypt and Central America. Dr. Brown's story begins uneventfully on an expedition out of Miami in 1970. Here, recreated, Dr. Brown was headed for an area between Andros Island and the Berry Islands, approximately 100 miles from Bimini. His intention was not to prove or disprove stories about Atlantis, but rather to search for sunken treasure.
We'd been searching the area for a number of years for Spanish galleons and had found several and taken some of the treasure, and we were very excited when we found this area.
They traveled to a spot near the tongue of the ocean. There, the bottom drops to 14,000 feet. Dr. Brown hoped that a recent storm might have shifted bottom sand in order to reveal the galleons.
The water was very murky, and we didn't get to see all that we would like to have seen, but after the storm moved the sand for us that we'd been digging on for several years unsuccessfully, we found ruins and buildings everywhere.
Much of Dr. Brown's photographic equipment was destroyed in the storm, thus making it impossible for a detailed record of the find.
We really had no choice, because if we had gone back for new equipment that we lost during the storm, if we hadn't got in the water, even as murky as it was, the sand would have covered the buildings up and we would have lost the view.
The ruins of the city Dr. Brown claims he found reflected a sophisticated level of architectural design.
The buildings had somewhat of an Egyptian or classic look to them. The ground mass was rippled, as though the area had been dropped into the ocean by some sort of cataclysmic action.
Then Dr. Brown reported that he came across the most magnificent find of all. In the murkiness, he spotted the tip of a submerged pyramid, barely visible above the ocean floor.
Looking at the structure, shape, and the size, it would be approximately 400 feet tall. I went in an opening, and in this opening, in the center of the room, there was a pedestal, and on the pedestal were two human hands made of brass or bronze, and in the center of the hands was the crystal. My first impression in the room was the shaft that was metallic, hanging straight down from the ceiling, pointing at the crystal. And it was gold colored. I swam, because it was still, the room was full of water, I swam up to the ceiling and tried to pry the rod loose. It wouldn't budge, so I settled back down to the floor. And I reached my hand in between the fingers of the metal hands, and I found the crystal was loose. And it was the only thing in the room that I could take home.
The crystal ball seems to possess powers that can repel a coiled stainless steel rod.
We found a meter with a 1.5 ounce weight, and it becomes sensitive to emanations, particularly magnetic emanations around people or things if they are charged. We find that if we can hold it straight without allowing it to flip from side to side, some strong influences will actually raise the weight in the air. Now, as we bring something into the field of the crystal, the ions tend to repel. If I can keep it balanced and bring it directly into the field and not let it tip from side to side, the weight will then not go to the side if I can keep it centered, and it will, as I come higher, it will raise it and make it weightless and actually float in the air.
Some historians say that crystals were the source of Atlantean power. Dr. Brown believes his crystal is evidence that such a culture existed and possessed powers unknown to modern man.
Maybe the ancients knew more than we did about life forms and life forces, and we might discover their secret.
In the last decade of exploration in the waters off Bimini, new finds cause us to question old theories. Atlantis has long been thought of as a myth, a figment of fanciful imagination, a tale told by Plato to amuse ancient Athens. But what of Dr. Brown's crystal? Dr. Marcel Vogel, a researcher at IBM, has devoted more than 20 years of investigation to determine the power of crystals and their effect on human potential.
Throughout history, the earliest recorded history we have, there's been a deep respect for the shape of a ball and the use of a quartz crystal ball for probing in the mind of an individual. Now, I've worked with Dr. Brown's crystal ball. I used his ball, and I felt a tremendous energy burst coming from the crystal.
The discovery of the crystal has spawned speculation that possible misuse of its powers by Atlanteans caused the Great Cataclysm. The island and all its buildings, it is said, were plunged into the sea. The Bimini Wall, therefore, might be the last visible relic of that lost civilization.
In Search Of will continue in a moment here on the History Channel.
Divers have always searched for hidden treasures of the sea. In the waters off Bimini may lie the clues that not only unlock the mystery of Atlantis, but the secrets of the mind as well. For the present, however, we must content ourselves with the inconclusive bits of evidence so far uncovered. The origin of the Bimini Wall seems destined to remain an enigma until more knowledge about Atlantis is revealed. On a mysterious pinpoint in the Pacific Ocean called Easter Island, a gathering of stone giants guards the shore. No one knows who carved them, why they exist, or how the 50-ton monsters were put into place. Yet they're here, unexplainable gargantuan pieces in baffling mystery. In the jungles of Central America, colossal stone heads were discovered 80 miles from where they were originally carved. Weighing 100 tons, there is no clue as to how they were transported through dense swamp. Nor do we know who moved them to this remote jungle. Long before the Egyptians built the pyramids, someone constructed a vast stone city atop a peak in the Andes. The ruins stand empty and silent. Each carving is a disconnected figure from the past, yet some common origin might join them together. The earth itself bears the portraits of still other giants scratched onto a plateau in California 10,000 years ago. Others were etched with precision into an English hillside long before the building of Stonehenge. The tools to carve and move the giants indicate an advanced technology. There is a place where the knowledge and skills to create the giants may be found. The kingdom of Atlantis. Never before have explorers been so close to finding Atlantis. Never have we possessed as many clues, nor have we been able to bring the detection equipment of modern science to the search. Until now. There occurred violent earthquakes and floods, and in a single day and night of misfortune, the island of Atlantis disappeared in the depths of the sea. So wrote the Greek philosopher Plato in the year 421 BC. Since then, adventurers obsessed by the tale of Atlantis have searched for traces of the remains of the fabled kingdom. Atlantis was said to have been a great city-state, ruled by a race of men supposedly descended from the gods. Was it a real city? A wondrous land, or a myth, a tale created by someone's wild imagination? If Atlantis existed, it would have been a place where technology was far more advanced than anywhere else on Earth. To discover such a city, we may use as clues descriptions that can be found in the writings of the great Greek philosopher, Plato. At first, a small Greek island in the Aegean seemed an unlikely place to start the search, for Plato had written of a great and wonderful empire. They had conquered almost all of Africa, he reported, and more than half of Europe. Such a kingdom hardly fits the image of a tiny island like Santorini. In 1966, however, the remains of an ancient building were dug from beneath 250 feet of ash and lava. Its broken walls signaled the first discovery of a great city. Today, only small villages cling to the Santorini mountainsides. But the island was once a large, circular landmass. 3,500 years ago, it was shattered by an incredible volcanic explosion. All that remains is a thin crescent of mountain and a sullen, smoldering volcano that erupts at least twice a century. The volcano that destroyed the island Plato knew as Thera may also have hidden all evidence of Atlantis. In many ways, the ruins are like those found elsewhere in the Aegean, reminiscent of the Minoan civilization. Then, reading Plato and viewing the broken walls and shattered pots, a sudden, chilling discovery is made. These ruins fit Plato's description of Atlantis with an uncanny accuracy. They constructed buildings about them and planted suitable trees, wrote Plato. Whatever fragrant things there now are in the earth or woods, or essences which distill from fruit and flower, grew and thrived in that land. They had such an amount of wealth as was never possessed by kings and potentates, and is not likely ever to be again. The entire area was densely crowded and kept up a multitudinous sound of human voices, of din and clatter of all sorts, night and day. There were the king's baths, and there were separate baths for women, and to each of them they gave as much adornment as possible. There were many temples built and dedicated to the gods, also gardens and places of exercise. Plato tells us the citizens of Atlantis were skilled engineers, astronomers, and architects. He describes buildings and tools, and time after time we see in the ruins of Santorini the almost eyewitness accuracy of his account. The clockwork gears fished from the Aegean Sea are part of an ancient computer. It was used to plot the course of the planets and stars across the skies of Greece. The first modern computer was built in 1930, yet these gears were fashioned 2,000 years earlier. Based on a highly advanced understanding of physics, mathematics, and astronomy, there is nothing else like it in classical Greek technology, but it may have derived its origin from Plato's Atlantis. The ruins on Santorini match Plato's description, but one piece of the puzzle refuses to fall into place. Despite the opinion of some experts that here indeed are the remains of Atlantis, Plato himself seems to suggest it lies elsewhere. We must search, he tells us, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. The Pillars of Hercules are today known as the Rock of Gibraltar. Therefore, Santorini, an island in the Aegean east of Gibraltar, could not be Atlantis. It must lie to the west, in the Atlantic Ocean. In a moment, we shall continue our search for Atlantis, beneath the oceans, thousands of miles from Plato's ancient Greece. The geography of the Earth is not constant. Dry land was once covered by ocean. What is now seabed was once mountain and forest. The Atlantic Ocean that now separates the Americas from Europe and Africa is so familiar, it's hard to imagine a time when it was not always there. But once, a great landmass stretched over what is now the Atlantic Ocean, bridging the Mediterranean and the Caribbean. Beneath the surface of both of those seas are the broken remains of ancient cities. They may represent the eastern and western ports of Atlantis. The search for the eastern border of Atlantis begins just beyond Gibraltar in the Spanish city of Cadiz. Once a Phoenician port, Cadiz is among the oldest cities in Europe. Here, Dr. Maxine Asher of the Ancient Mediterranean Research Association met Spanish diver Francisco Salazar Casero. Two and a half miles offshore and 95 feet deep on the continental shelf, Casero found an ancient amphora. It had lain among the ruins of a city older, he said, than any of the Greek and Phoenician remains in the area. And here, the mystery of Atlantis is complicated by the modern world. According to Dr. Asher, the Spanish government revoked their permission to dive at the site. Spanish politics, she says, have prevented further underwater exploration off Cadiz. Although halted, the Asher expedition produced a significant find. It indicates that the east coast of Atlantis might have been precisely where Plato had placed it, as he said, beyond the Pillars of Hercules. There is other evidence to support Plato's description of an island that was greater than Africa and Asia together. Ancient maps have led geographers to explore the possibility that the Antarctic slowly drifted south in the wake of a massive upheaval. Whatever the reason, we know that once it was part of a much larger landmass. The western edge of that land may lie here, beneath the crystal waters of the Caribbean. The actual discovery, however, is no more astonishing than the man who predicted its very existence. These strange blocks were first seen in a vision by the most remarkable mystic of all time, Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce was known as the Sleeping Prophet. Hundreds of astonishingly accurate predictions are cataloged in the archives of the foundation which bears his name. In 1939, Edgar Cayce predicted the end of World War II and his own death. Both events, he said, would take place in 1945. He was right. He foresaw the freedom of India from England, the death of John Kennedy, and a number of geological changes that are still to take place. Edgar Cayce's most remarkable prophecy, however, concerns a lost kingdom. Geological upheavals, he said, would bring about the rediscovery of Atlantis. Cayce saw Atlantis breaking up into 5 islands. The largest he called Poseidia. And Poseidia will be among the first portions of Atlantis to rise again, expected in 68 or 69. That prediction was made in 1940. In 1967, a pilot flying over the Bahamas sighted a rectangular structure beneath the crystal clear waters. It was precisely where Cayce had said Atlantis would be, under the slime of ages of seawater, near what is known as Bimini, off the coast of Florida. And here they lie, huge white blocks chiseled with incredible precision and covering a large area of ocean bottom. No one knows how they got here 35 feet beneath the sea off the coast of Bimini. But here they are found. 2 possible explanations exist. 1, the stones are the remains of a network of paved roads. 2, they are the tops of huge stone walls that once enclosed the palaces of Atlantis. Author Peter Tompkins filmed the work of an expedition that hoped to locate Atlantis using clues from Casey's writings. Aboard were Count Pino Turola, an Italian archaeologist, underwater explorer Dmitry Rebekov, and archaeologist Dr. David Zink. This expedition was to produce one of the most startling finds ever made in the search for Atlantis. Beyond the giant blocks, the divers discovered the remains of several ships. One had gone down in the year 1830. Beneath it lay the fragments of still another ship, one that had sailed the seas more than 3,000 years ago. Not a ship of Atlantis, certainly, but according to Yale's Dr. J. Manson Valentine, a voyager from Phoenicia. The Phoenicians were the greatest sea traders of ancient times. Their ships called at every port in the known world. Could it be that Phoenician traders came more than 5,000 miles from the site of classical Mediterranean civilization to deal with a rich and fabled kingdom? The question posed by the wrecks and the blocks of the Bimini Wall remained unanswered as the expedition continued to explore the waters off Bimini. South of the wall, Pino Turola, a leading underwater explorer, discovered 4 marble columns. At first, it was thought they were bits of ballast from a wrecked ship. After days of diving and investigation, Turola developed a different theory. He believes that the columns could be 12,000 years old, actual relics of a center constructed in stone and marble. There are more tests to be made. Geologic dating of these and the expedition's other finds could confirm the explorers' theory that here is Atlantis. Here is the fabled world. Here, ships may have visited a crowded port. Here, marketplaces may have been filled with the multitudinous sound of human voices that Plato told us about. The din and clatter of all sorts, night and day. The broken columns may be all that remains of an entire civilization blasted apart by an incredible explosion. At every one of the sites we have investigated, there are artifacts of a remarkable civilization. But nowhere can we find the remains of the people who once lived in Atlantis. Plato may have explained it when he said the people of Atlantis were warned of impending disaster, and they fled. No one has ever investigated this aspect of Plato's account. But if it is correct, the clues to where the Atlanteans went next may be contained in the giant megaliths that guard the lonely outposts of the world. At Easter Island, atop the Andes at Tiahuanaco, in the jungles of Central America at La Venta, we can find the final clues to the mystery. These monoliths may tell us where the refugees, the engineers, astronomers, and architects fled, carrying the technology and culture of Atlantis. If so, we can begin to understand why the great cultures of the past bear such striking similarities. Egypt, one of the greatest of ancient civilizations, is symbolized by its pyramids. So too does the pyramid mark the ruins of this highly advanced Mayan society. There are other similarities. The Egyptian temple of Amen-Ra at Karnak is aligned with the sun. Only at the time of the summer solstice, the sun strikes the central chamber of the temple, known to the ancient Egyptians as the high room of the sun. 8,000 miles away, in the remote peaks of the Andes, the Inca marked the seasonal solstices with this monument. Using almost the same words as the Egyptians, they called it the hitching post of the sun. Perhaps the most remarkable record of the exodus from Atlantis is preserved in the 1,500-year-old pottery of a Peruvian tribe called the Mochica. In their vases and utensils, they depicted Orientals and Negroes, Arabs, Indians, Egyptians, and Greeks, people who might have been known to each other in Atlantis. In the stones and bones of the past, we've made a startling discovery. There is a common origin for many widely dispersed ancient civilizations. In the tombs of Peru, we see similarities with other cultures, with the Mayans, with the Egyptians. In the development of mathematics and astronomy, we see links that may reach back to a common origin in Atlantis. And most startling of all is the shared belief in eternal life. In fragrant linen, buried amidst the treasures of their world, they seek the hereafter, guided by their ancestral traditions. Perhaps their ancestors were the people of Atlantis. We have attempted to piece together the jigsaw puzzle of history that has been scattered by disaster. In so doing, we've found what may be the only remaining traces of the lost kingdom of Atlantis. Of one thing we can be certain: the memory of Atlantis is no myth. It is history. The tale of Atlantis was first told by the priests of Egypt to a Greek poet named Solon. They assured him that the original archive containing the tale of Atlantis still existed. That was 3,000 years ago. In one of his last prophecies, Edgar Cayce said that the archives of Atlantis would one day be revealed in Egypt. Soon, a new expedition will begin the re-exploration of the pyramids of Egypt, searching among the hieroglyphs and tomb paintings for the absolute proof that once, back before the beginnings of history, a marvelously advanced civilization of human beings once ruled the earth from an island continent called Atlantis.